The jar was dated 1944. In a hand that had pressed too hard on the wax pencil, each number slightly crooked, as though written in the dark, or by something that had learned the motion of writing, but not the reason for it. The lid was sealed with a red rubber ring gone brittle with age, and there was something inside that shifted when you tilted it. Not liquid, not solid. Something between the two. The way a memory sits in the chest. Present, weightless, impossible to set down. The cellar smelled of cold stone and old sweetness and something else beneath both. Something that had been breathing in the dark for a very long time. The jar did not rattle. It did not hum. It simply waited, the way certain things wait, with a patience that has no bottom to it. And when the fog came down off the ridge that evening, it found the door to the cellar already open. Now, settle in. Pull that blanket up around your shoulders. The story I am going to tell you happened slow, the way most true things happen. Not all at once, a little at a time, like frost working its way into the cracks of old wood. It begins in October, up in the Blue Ridge, at an elevation most people would call unreasonable for an apple orchard. The kind of altitude where the fog does not come and go. It simply lives there, drifting between the gray trunks like something that has forgotten where it was going. The orchard was called Bitter-Apple Holler, though on no map you would find it labeled so. The locals just knew. The way people know things in the mountains, quietly and without wanting to discuss it further. A woman named Cora Veach had inherited the property from her mother's great-aunt, a woman she had met exactly once at a funeral when Cora was 7 years old. She remembered the woman as tall and dry-voiced and smelling of vinegar. The inheritance came with 4 acres, a frame house badly in need of repointing, and a root cellar that the estate paperwork described in careful typed language as containing personal effects and preserved goods to be inventoried at the heir's discretion. Cora arrived in early October, when the apples were long past their prime, going soft and dark on the branches in the gray light. She was 34 and recently widowed, and had no particular reason not to go. She told herself she would spend 2 weeks, settle the estate, and return to the lowlands before the cold set in. The fog had other notions. The house was cold and smelled of old calendars and something faintly sweet, the ghost of a smell, like sweetness pressed between the pages of a book left closed for decades. The wallpaper in the kitchen showed a pattern of small blue flowers. and Cora stood in front of it for a long while on that first evening, her coat still buttoned, feeling the particular heaviness that comes from standing in a house where someone else's life has ended and your own has not yet resumed. She did not go to the cellar that first night. She made coffee on the gas range and drank it at the kitchen window and watched the fog settle into the hollow below the orchard until the apple trees disappeared entirely. Then she went to bed in the spare room, under a quilt that smelled of cedar and dried lavender, and she lay still and listened to the house, and eventually she slept. She went to the cellar the second morning, when the fog was low enough to blur the tree line into a smear of gray-green, and the late apples hung overhead like small brown lanterns going dark. The cellar door was set into the hillside behind the house, a wooden frame, painted red once, the color faded to a tired pink. She pulled it open and felt cold rise up from below, carrying the smell of stone and earthen walls and something sweetly organic. She descended the stone steps into the cool dark, and she found the shelves. They ran the full length of both cellar walls, rough-hewn pine shelving darkened with age and moisture, and they were full. Hundreds of mason jars, the quart-sized ones mostly, with their two-piece metal lids and red rubber sealing rings. Some were labeled in pencil on strips of white medical tape, others in wax pencil written directly on the glass. And all of them, every single one, contained something that caught the thin light from the doorway in a way that was difficult to account for. Not wrong exactly, but not right either. The contents of the jars were not food. That was the first thing Cora understood, standing very still on the stone floor with the cold settling around her ankles. There were no green beans, no stewed tomatoes, no apple butter, no pickled beets. What the jars held was difficult to describe by color or by texture. Some appeared to contain a kind of interior vapor, a soft misting that pressed gently against the glass from inside, like breath on a cold morning. Others held something darker, more settled, a density without form. One jar near the bottom shelf seemed to contain nothing at all. But when Cora lifted it and held it at eye level, she felt a sudden pressure in her ears, like the pop of changing altitude on a long descent. She set that one down carefully. She read the labels. January 1953. First snow heard on the roof. Weight heavy. Another. Smell of the big fire, August 1931. Gone sweet by now. And another, smaller, the letters cramped together. The last of the quiet before the preacher came. 1967. Cora stood with that jar in her hands for a long time, The cellar was very still. Above her, moving through the orchard without a sound, the fog shifted. She did not open any of the jars, not that day. She simply moved among them, reading, until the light through the cellar door had shifted to the color of weak tea, and the whole afternoon had gone without her noticing. That night, at the kitchen table, she found the ledger. It was tucked between the wall and the back of a drawer in the sideboard, the kind of placement that suggests either accident or intention, impossible to tell which after the fact. The ledger was cloth-covered, dark green, its spine splitting. Inside, in her great-aunt's compressed, angular handwriting, was a record. Column after column of dates and descriptions, a preservationist's log. But what was being preserved was not food. The smell of my mother's hands. 1929. Sealed, 3rd week of November. 1 quart. The silence after my brother's name was spoken for the last time in this house. 1941. Difficult to seal. Kept wanting to come loose at the ring. Required a second attempt. The bite of the January blizzard, 1920. Full body sensation. This one runs cold still, even in summer. Keep toward the back of the shelf. Cora read until the lamp needed tending, and then read some more. She began to understand the shape of what her great-aunt had spent her long life doing here, alone, at this altitude, in this fog. The woman had been a keeper, not of food, not of memory in the ordinary sense, not photographs or letters or the sentimental clutter of a life. She had been capturing the raw sensory texture of moments, the physical fact of things that would otherwise dissolve entirely, the weight of a silence, the temperature of a loss, the smell of something that existed only once, and then never again. There was a word in the ledger for the process. Her great-aunt called it putting up, the same phrase mountain women have always used for canning. I have been putting up since before I understood what it was I was putting up. This was written on the first page, in ink gone brown with age, beneath the year 1924. And on the 3rd page was a section heading that Cora read twice before continuing. On the assistance of the hand. The entry was careful and precise, the way a person writes when they are determined to be accurate about something that may not be believed. The hand comes when the work requires it. It does not speak. It does not eat. It has the shape and proportion of a woman's hand and forearm, no more. It is pale, the pale of birchwood, not of illness, and it moves with a certainty that is restful to observe, the way a good cook moves in a familiar kitchen. It knows the sealing process. It assists with the lids when my fingers ache. It does not stay longer than the work requires. What it requires is a vessel. The jars must be sealed while held against something living. A wrist, the flat of a palm. The sensations do not spoil into loose haunting if they are sealed against the warmth of a living body at the moment of closing. The hand understands this. Cora put the ledger down on the table and sat very still. Outside, the fog had come fully down off the ridge. She could see nothing beyond the kitchen glass, only the thick, soft gray pressing close against the house. And somewhere in that gray, the intermittent sound of apples releasing from branches and falling into the dark below. She went to bed. She lay in the spare room under the cedar and lavender quilt and listened to the house settle around her. And she did not sleep for a long time. But when she did, she slept deeply. The heavy and complete sleep of high-altitude places, where the air has more weight to it than you are used to carrying. In the morning, there was a jar on the kitchen table that had not been there the night before. A quart jar, clear glass. The tape label read, October, this year. The sound of a widow settling into a strange house, first night. And inside, very gently, something moved the way smoke moves when there is no draft to prompt it. Cora sat across from the jar and did not touch it. She was cold. The stove had gone out in the night. Somewhere below her feet she could hear, or believe she could hear, the faint and periodic music of glass touching glass in the cellar dark. She went back to the cellar that afternoon with the ledger, and she read standing among the jars. And the longer she stood in that cool and ordered dark, the more she felt it. The sense of the place having a logic, an old and settled purpose. The way a good kitchen has a logic. Everything knowing its use. Everything in its correct relation to everything else. The whole of it making quiet sense that settles into the body before the mind has finished deciding what to think. The hand was there when she turned from the second shelf. Not dramatically, not suddenly. It was simply present at the far end of the shelving, moving a jar from one position to another with the careful deliberateness of someone who has done this work for longer than memory. Pale as the inside of fresh-cut birch, the fingers long and sure. It did not acknowledge her. It was working. Cora watched it. And she found, to her own quiet surprise, that she was not afraid. She was something closer to recognition, the feeling of watching a thing being done correctly, and knowing the correctness of it in your body before your mind has finished forming an opinion. She began to help. She held the jars steady while the hand sealed the lids. She pressed her palm flat against the cool glass and felt, each time, a brief and vivid passing, a scent, a temperature, the pressure of a particular silence, moving from somewhere outside comprehension through the glass, going still inside the jar. Each jar, when sealed, had a completed quality she had no word for. The way a sentence arrives at its final right word and everything settles. She had been working for 2 hours, perhaps, when she noticed the jar on the shelf nearest the cellar steps. It was recently sealed. Its tape label was fresh. October, this year. The smell of cedar and old lavender. The weight of sleep in a cold room. She had not sealed that one. She had been sleeping when that one was sealed. She looked at the jar beside it. October this year. The warmth of lamplight on a turned page. The pressure of recognition arriving slowly. And the one beside that, October, this year. The sound of a woman's breathing as it lengthens and slows toward sleep. Cora stood very still in the cellar. The hand continued its work at the far end of the shelf. The fog outside was complete and white and pressed its full, soft weight against the hillside and the house and the orchard. She understood then. Not the way you understand a simple thing all at once. The way you understand a mountain, piece by piece, as you move through it. She understood enough. The jars were not only keeping the old things now, they were keeping her. Each breath, each small movement through the cold rooms of the house, each quality of attention she brought to the reading of a page or the drinking of cold coffee at the kitchen window. All of it being put up, sealed against glass, set to cool in the organized dark of the cellar while the fog held the holler in its patient embrace. She reached for the cellar door. Her palm rested there a moment. The brief, warm fact of a hand against old wood. And somewhere behind her, she heard the soft, certain sound of a lid being seated and sealed. She climbed into the fog. She walked out through the orchard where the last apples lay in the grass, giving softly underfoot, past their ripeness, returning to the ground in their slow way. And in the cellar below the house, the jar of that moment was already cooling on the shelf beside all the others. And the jar of this one, and the one that followed, the work going on without her. She was already inside the jars. She was already being kept. The fog was soft. The mountain was patient. The hand knew its work. Sleep now.